And welcome back to Outsiders. You're with Rowan Dean and Ross Cameron, and we are going to talk with someone in a second about, you will have read over the weekend, lots of allegations, talk of war crimes, perhaps, with the SAS. We've heard of a sociologist who's been compiling reports about the SAS. We've had retired generals inviting people within the SAS to write letters about their experiences. So there's a whole lot of noise going on. We thought we would speak to someone about, not about specific allegations, because they are yet to be tested in court and will be. So we're not going to deal with the specific allegations, but we're going to talk in general about what is happening with the Army and our Special Forces. Joining us, a former Australian Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel, now retired, Riccardo Bosi. Welcome to Outsiders, Riccardo.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Ross.
So talk us through your background. You were in Kuwait, you've worked for the United Arab Emirates as a consultant, you headed up the parts of the Special Forces, so talk us through your specific knowledge of the Special Forces and the SAS.
I served in Specialist Service Regiment, 1st Commando Regiment, and there are 2 regiments within the Special Forces family.
Yep.
And the headquarters as well.
And when was this?
From 85 through to 2004.
Right, okay. And what was your role there?
In the regiment as a troop commander, vehicle mounted troop commander.
Yep.
Then in the commandos, I was a company commander. In the headquarters, I was the director of capability development, which is future warfare planning.
Right.
Thinking ahead of the curve.
Okay, so your concerns about, so we'll just read out from one of the articles. The SAS became so concerned about alleged misconduct by its elite troops, Riccardo, that in late 2015, one of the SAS's commanders invited every member of the regiment to write to him personally about alleged misconduct. And this has led to the allegations we've heard about a code name Leonidas allegedly kicking some guy down a cliff, and allegations to do with his death. Now, your concern, tell us about your concerns with the, not the specific allegations, but the overall story, this constant looking at the behaviour of the SAS.
Okay, I'd like to open the batting by recalling some famous words said by a famous Prime Minister a long time ago.
Yes.
We sleep soundly in our beds at night because rough men are ready to deliver justice to those who would do us harm.
Yes.
And we've got to remember that the whole purpose of the Defence Force is to kill people. That's it. As unpleasant as it sounds, that's our job. Now, having said that, this is a stitch-up. We're arguing about the wrong things. If people want to find out about the SAS regiment, they should conduct an investigation involving Ministers of Defence, Chiefs of Defence Force and the Commanders of Special Operations Command. And you might want to go back about 15 years, because whatever the SAS regiment is, and it is the finest regiment in the Australian Army without doubt, it is a product of their decisions. It is their creation. So if there are problems in the regiment, these things don't happen in isolation. They follow orders. And those orders lead to consequences.
So do you, so you're saying they're looking at the wrong place, or should they be investigating these specific allegations that we read about in the Sydney Morning Herald and other places? So they're pointing at a specific individual in some instances, this codenamed Leonidas character, who they seem to be extravagant claims, almost beyond belief, that this character was allegedly mimicking what he'd seen in a Hollywood film, and his behaviour was done to impress people who'd seen a Hollywood film. Do you buy any of that?
It's not relevant. It might be true. If somebody has done something wrong, absolutely, investigate, hold them to account. But as I said, this is a stitch-up. There are senior officers who know exactly what happened and why, and just my opinion, they are hiding.
So is this politically driven? Because we've talked a lot on this show about the politics now, if you like, infecting the armed forces, political correctness, for example. We've got a sociologist, her name here I have, who has been working. She's on a Samantha Crumpverts, has a consulting firm which has received contracts of about $3.5 million from the Defence Department for a series of projects aimed at examining and changing the culture within the Defence Forces. So how important is it to change the culture, and to what extent are these allegations the result of this sort of spotlight being put on the culture of the forces rather than specific incidents?
Your first question was, is the government complicit? Absolutely. They have an agenda to emasculate the Defence Force. But what they seem to forget is the other side has a vote, and they're not going to emasculate theirs. War's a nasty business. This is not fun, and it's not fair. Second point, Samantha Crumpet is uniquely unqualified to examine anything and give advice to anybody. I wouldn't trust her.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, of course.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust her to give me advice to what to feed my dog.
Well, they're sociologists, and to what extent do you think that having a sociologist studying the armed forces, the report says that she is uniquely qualified with her firm, Rapid Context, to do research projects, organisational reviews and evaluations to deliver accurate analysis. Do you think that's the case?
She's uniquely unqualified, in my opinion. Once again, this is a Defence Force.
Yep.
She has no expertise, she has no understanding of it, so she has no ability to make an accurate assessment.
So from your understanding, having been there, tell us about your actual experience in battle situations.
Okay. Most recently, I was contracted, after I retired, I was contracted by the United Arab Emirates Special Operations Command to help them raise their level of capability.
Yep.
And the range of work I did was high-level strategic planning, capability development frameworks. And at the lower level, we trained up teams in the UAE and then deployed with them to Afghanistan to conduct operations there. The Commander Special Operations Command, who's a tremendous bloke, pulled me aside and said, "Rick, I want you to make our men like the SAS." Now, that's a tough call.
Yeah.
But we got close. We got the UAE Special Operations soldiers doing things they had never done before. And they told us it couldn't be done, but my team and I did it. We got them outside the wire, on their hind legs, leading operations, combined operations with the Americans, and doing a tremendous job.
Well, look, my question is, I mean, I believe one should bring a judicial temperament to any kind of allegation, and obviously we're not sifting through the individual details. But the thing that concerns me is this feeling that not only has the Commonwealth Public Service, instead of being massively preoccupied with the citizens' needs and serving the citizen, the Commonwealth Public Service has just turned in on itself with a total preoccupation with its own recruitment practices and with its unconscious bias and with its gender ratios and blah, blah, blah. The poor old citizen comes stone motherless last. And my sense is likewise in the Defence Force. Really, it started before David Morrison, who may prefer to be described as David Morris person because of the risk of gender, that once he started going on about, the standard you walk past, blah, 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 all of it, this internal preoccupation, I'm saying there's a sense in which I don't kind of really want to know all the details of what goes on at the moment of confrontation. I just want you guys to keep us safe, and I have this feeling that the government is absolutely determined to sort of pick every thread in the jumper rather than supporting you guys to do your job.
So what's the impact on morale, basically?
Well, 2 points. You're exactly right. I think it is an intentional strategy on behalf of the government. The SAS regiment specifically, in my opinion, and the ADF generally have been betrayed by headquarters ADF. We expect politicians to be self-serving, ignorant, lazy, stupid. It's an expectation. We expect more from our generals, and our generals have let us down. Our air marshals, our generals and our admirals have let us down. They've drunk the Kool-Aid. And anybody below the rank of lieutenant colonel and below are furious. And they have every right to be. In my opinion, they've been betrayed. And if they're going to betray the SAS regiment, they're going to betray the entire ADF.
Well, this is the thing. Well, I see the job in the same way that if you're the CEO of the AFL, your job is to fight to keep politics out of your code. And in the same way, I say, if you're a general, your job is to resist this desire, this sort of desire to feminise, to sort of turn the armed forces into an HR department of the ANZ Bank, you know, with a group of, you know, of quota
floats
wandering around.
Is there an SAS float?
You must not use that word in that sentence, you know. Is there anyone in the Defence Forces who the ranks can look up to as somebody fighting for the traditions which have made us a proud force around the world?
There might be one or two, they're not many, because they remain silent. There's a club, a quiet club where no one criticises anyone. And that's the most egregious part of this for me, because there are a number of retired generals, admirals and air marshals who lack the spine to speak up and say this is wrong, because I know many of them do, but they would say nothing. They would rather preside over the smoking ruins of the Defence Force as the Chief of the Defence Force rather than actually resign, retire and criticise the decisions of hire.
Yeah.
They are terribly well trained. They're excellent commanders, but there's not a leader amongst them, because there's a difference. Command is the lawful execution of your authority. Leadership comes from here. And here's how I define it. And this is a tough definition. But real leadership is someone who uses nothing but what they are, to unite many to achieve good. So it's not about manipulation, power, force, because I can put a gun to your head and you'll do what I say. It's extremely exhilarating.
He doesn't always. I've tried it.
Well, it might not work with Ross.
But, you know, most
people would respond to that. Yeah. But that's not leadership.
Yeah.
They're great commanders, but not a leader amongst them. The best leaders in the army are corporals, because they have to look at their mates in the eye and say, come on, fellas, follow me. And they share the risks.
Well, you see, I'm going to have, you know, I've had a relationship with Maurice Payne, Minister for Defence, for basically 30 years. We've had perfectly amicable private relationship. But I have to say to you that my view is that her selection as Minister was a kind of deliberate message to the forces that the Turnbull government is not interested in Defence Force capability. The Turnbull government is interested in getting sort of like one of those little clear plastic sort of tools that we got in primary school where you could colour in a circle and a triangle and a plus sign, and she just wants to take this gender ratio and just superimpose it across Australia's Defence Force. No matter what else the cost and consequence is, we're going to spend $100 million if we have to get more women doing dusty, dirty, dangerous jobs around bombs that tend to blow up. And surprise, surprise, they don't want to do it, so let's spend another $100 million, because I have the feeling the Minister for Defence does not care about Defence Force capability.
No, it's a joke. I remember seeing a photograph of the EU Ministers for Defence, and they're all female. This is a victory for women.
Yeah.
Look, I'm an old man. I gave up this game a long time ago, but I'm still down at the gym twice a week lifting somewhere between 15 to 25 tonnes. Now, I guarantee there's not a woman in the Defence Force that could, after a 15-kilometre run, wearing a full pack, full combat load, and that's about 50 to 60 kilos, depending on the op, can drag me and my kid across 50 metres of broken ground. They're going to sacrifice good men's lives on the altar of insanity. Feminism. It's nuts. It's insane.
And we've had the political correctness. We had Justin Huggett on the show a few weeks ago. He was upset about the idea that the icons, those, you know, the phantom death skulls and all that, he was upset that Angus Campbell was attacking those. We've had the gender issue. How do you see political correctness as the real enemy here? Is that what's happening?
It's the tool. It's not the enemy, the tool. The enemy is the government, because they are destroying the country. If you have a look at what the government is doing in defence or in power, if you look at the elements of national greatness, what makes a nation great? It's easy. There are pieces that you put together and you can audit. We're doing okay. Let me give you an example. Imagine one of the elements of national greatness, fundamental elements of national power, is resources. Now, imagine a country with a ton of resources, say coal and uranium. Let's say another one is space. I want to get a country with lots of space, let's say. A culture, a world-beating culture. Australia has everything it needs. Everything.
Yep.
To be a great country, bar one thing. That's leadership. That's it. If you replace the leadership, the government, this country would turn around, and we like to pretend that we punch above our weight. We don't really, but we could.
Now, you've been consulting in the UAE. Tell us a bit about your work there, just briefly.
Okay, initially it was there to plan operations for the UAE, but then once I arrived, there were obvious gaps in capability. And so I designed a strategy process where His Highness would say, I would like this to occur. And when their Highnesses express wishes, the world moves very quickly. But there wasn't a sophisticated system in place. So what I did was I took the best of strategic planning from the ADF, the UK and the US, and designed a very simple but clear process where his wish would be described, and we'd follow a list of processes, so we actually created all the capability in its entirety. For example, if you want to conduct air operations, you need an aircraft, but you need a pilot, and you need training, and you need maintenance, and you need tools, and you need real estate at the airport, and you need fuel. So without all these parts understood and put together, you don't actually get the capability. So I designed that for the UAE Special Ops entirety, and then we worked our way down and refined it to the point where we...
So if you take that strategy, Riccardo, what's happening in politics is that our political leaders are designing the wrong thing. They're designing the gender equal, diverse, inclusive, politically correct sort of army that they want. They're not designing an army to go out and, as you say, kill people in order to keep us safe.
Oh, absolutely. They have an agenda that's got nothing to do with Australia.
Now, I'm going to read a brief statement by Andrew Hastie, a good friend of this program. He's been on Outsiders before. He is a former SAS and now in politics. Following the allegations, he's said that as a former SAS officer, he finds the allegations of war crimes deeply troubling. He says, I know that many good men and women have served in the Special Air Service Regiment since 1957. They have served our nation quietly in the shadows and shown incredible bravery under fire. He goes on to talk about Sergeant D, who was awarded the Star of Gallantry for courage under fire, running into machine gun fire in order to rescue a trooper. This is the key thing. He says, war is a terrible, degrading thing. Our soldiers have had to make tough decisions in complex, dangerous and uncertain environments. People are imperfect. But he also goes on to say that people who wear the uniform must be accountable. It is important that the Australian people know that the Special Air Service Regiment is currently led by one of the finest officers that Andrew has ever worked with. So here we have this kind of dichotomy where you've got on the one hand the politicians pushing one agenda, and you're saying that the soldiers or the below Lieutenant Colonel, they're fuming at what's going on.
Absolutely, and I'd love our politicians to be held to the same standard. It'd be nice. Now imagine this, imagine if parliamentarians were required to apply the same standards as company directors, that they are severally and individually responsible and liable for their decisions, and all of a sudden they'd be a whole lot more careful before they made one decision. And
before they'd signed the Paris Agreement, they'd be a lot more careful.
So we have a bunch of politicians whom I don't hold in high regard, as you can imagine, rightly questioning, because that's their responsibility, but the smear, it's got Turnbull's fingerprints all over it. It's a smear allegation. The Sydney Morning Hamas is doing its bit to drip feed allegations and smear. No actual serious investigation, no AFP, no charges laid, but let's keep smearing them because their objective is to remove the SAS. Why? Because that's what the left wants to do. We have a left Prime Minister.
One of the...
in my opinion.
Got that, Riccardo?
One of the costs for which there is no accounting standard is what happens to an organisation where I would say in the armed forces generally, but the SAS in particular, you can never remunerate a combat soldier adequately for the risks that he is taking on the front line. You can't pay, you can't add another 20k for the bullet as it whizzes past.
Domestic violence leave, 10 days
so therefore,
a year.
the motivation in part comes from ambition. Comes from the hope that you can distinguish yourself and rise through the ranks. So then once the minister at the top says, no, the only people who will rise through the ranks have a particular combination of chromosomes, which has nothing to do with their battle performance. And I would like to, my fear is that by destroying the power of male ambition, we will very substantially weaken Defence Force capability.
Oh, without a doubt. It was common knowledge that lieutenant colonels, that rank, combat hardened, they knew exactly what it was like, were resigning because they were told they weren't going to get promoted because the gender quota had to be met. And then, the general said there's all sorts of weasel words. No, there's no quota. Of course there is. Of course there is. So they're leaving. But you left one thing out. Napoleon said that a man will not sell you his life, but he'll give it away for a piece of coloured ribbon. Because what that ribbon represents is a man at his highest. In his own estimation, I have faced that which is most dangerous. That's what men are designed to do. So you can't pay them. And we joined the Defence Force for love of country. And that's why we're there. It's not because the money's great, because it wasn't. Certainly when I joined, it was bloody awful. And they gave us additional allowances every so often, and that was nice, but that didn't keep us there. We did it for love of country. And even when someone was promoted ahead of us, because ambition is extremely powerful, but even if someone was promoted ahead of us and we knew that they were the best man for the job, we accepted it and we moved on. Life's not fair, and war is even less fair. And you don't need nonsense interfering with what is the most important function of government, that is provide for the defence of the country. And the trouble now is we are at war. Our government won't tell us we're at war with our government. It's an insurgency. It's not a hot war, it's not a cold war, it's an insurgency. And they're coming through in other ways. And we are being weakened every day. Have a look at the state of the nation. Power, employment, housing prices. These are not accidents. These are the logical consequence of decisions made by government.
Absolutely. Riccardo Bosi, thank you so much for coming on Outsiders today. You're so right on so many issues, and more importantly, thank you for the service you've done for our nation and for helping keep us safe in our beds at night. Riccardo Bosi, people can check you out on your website, Lionheartaustralasia.com. I'd check that out, lionheartaustralasia.com. Thank you, Riccardo. We're going to take a short break. Now, we've just had some hot Outsiders Outsourced, fresh off the plate, come running in here during the break, and listen to this. Rowan and Ross, boys, you have had some terrific guests on Outsiders, but Riccardo Bosi is the best ever. Talk about straight talk, calling it how it is. No bull, boom. Loads of common sense with a high level of intelligence, together with his background experience. Please get this fella into Parliament. This is from Mrs. Bosi. No, sorry, just joking. And make him Minister for Defence. Do your viewers a favour and get this gentleman back onto the show real soon. And we've got another one. Riccardo Bosi was brilliant. It is time that every effort should be made to replace Malcolm Turnbull before this country is brought to its knees. What an amazing interview with Riccardo this morning. He should be the Minister for Defence. A lot of people seem to think that. So, glad we got Riccardo on. Now, I want to get to our next bit of lefty lunacy by introducing, we need some help on this one. It's been in the news today. I'm delighted to welcome back to Outsiders. He was very, very popular last time he was here. I'm not going to say exclusively with the ladies, but certainly, can we say ladies? No, anyway, whatever. Delighted to welcome back to Outsiders, Riccardo Bosi. Riccardo, you are a former Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel.
I like the Lieutenant Colonels because they're like still in the action.
Yeah.
Right? These are the guys who still smell the gunshot. they're not so far back in the chain of command that they're just watching it on a screen.
Well, you'll notice that most coups around the planet are run by colonels.
Yes.
They're just short of that hallowed rank of general.
Yeah. And presumably it's one of the reasons, one of the things which has kind of allowed you, and I hear in the Defence Forces themselves, that from kind of the colonels down, there's still some of the military culture that we so respect and admire, whereas the more senior ranks have just completely bowed.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about.
A lily on a hot day to Canberra.
Well, this is what we're going to talk about, and this is why you're here, Riccardo. Apart from the great news, which you're going to tell us personally, your own great news, which we'll get to in a second. But here we have the Daily Telegraph today, great article by Miranda Devine and Jack Houghton, all about, great headline there, Army drops the H-bomb, Riccardo. So we've learned that there's a guide where basically the Army are told, you know, not to use him and her and he and she, but to use gender-neutral pronouns, just in case the person you happen to be talking to, the soldier you happen to be talking to, might not be the same same sex that you thought they were. So it's better to be polite. Now, Maurice Payne was quick to poo-hoo this and say, no, this isn't political correctness gone mad. She was on Alan Jones' 2GB show this morning, Ray Hadley, I'm sorry, this morning, where she pretended that, no, there's nothing to see here. It's not a directive, it's just a kind of nice thing we're doing. Have a listen to Maurice Payne.
The guide does suggest that if you're talking about relationships, then you might want to use a broader term, rather than presuming the person you're talking to is with one person or another. It is very much cast in that light, but we are not changing in any way, shape or form the way in which we require the ADF to work together and to address each other.
OK, Riccardo, fire away, mate.
OK, 2 points. Firstly, I note that Maurice Payne said that she was unaware of this. I find that very hard to believe, because nothing in the military happens without Hire's approval. So either she's out of touch, or the Commandant of the Australian Defence Force Academy, Brigadier Cheryl Pearce, is out of control, because she wrote the piece. I read it, and it was interesting. 2 points on this one. The first definition, because definitions matter, the first definition in the glossary is ally, and it says that an ally is someone outside the LGBTI spectrum, yet a friend of those within the spectrum. Now, can you think of a more emotionally charged word than ally to a soldier? Because what's the opposite of an ally?
Yes.
The enemy.
The enemy, yep.
So Brigadier Pearce and her judgment is appalling. She's manifestly inadequate to the task, because she's dividing her academy instead of uniting. There's one thing: unity of purpose. This nonsense that diversity is strength. I mean, what is that? Up is down, black is white, left is right. It's just nonsense.
Excellent. Ross?
Well, I want to know, is the Defence Force an organisation which is intended to deliver an actual capability to defend this vast continent, or is Australia's Defence Force merely the pretext to provide subsidies to sort of depressed, formerly industrial towns, and to run a broad spectrum social experiment of correct political values, which it seems the latter two are the government's priorities, whereas the first one is the citizens' priority.
Well, that's exactly right. It's not unusual for government to select a location to prop up its electoral chances. The parachute training school was moved down to Nowra. I can't remember the MP at the time. Gash?
Yes.
Joanna Gash?
Yes.
Moved down there. Now, think of what a parachute school needs. It needs still air. And Nowra's on the coast. And what does the coast get? Secondly, it was co-located with the rotary wing of the Naval Air Arm. And parachutes and helicopter blades don't work well. So, yeah, you're exactly right. They use it as a bit of a stopgap to help their economic inadequacies.
So I want to draw attention to this bloke who was on photographed last week, I think it was. A few people commented on it. He's got a pink fingernail. He's proudly displaying a pink fingernail in support of presumably diversity and inclusion. So, Riccardo, what are your thoughts on this approach to defending our shores? Do you think holding up the pinky with the pink fingernail would deter some aggressive force coming at us, that they think, oh, we're not going to invade Australia because they've got diversity and inclusion, so they will welcome us with open arms? What is all this about?
Once again, madness. Look, I'm a first-generation Australian. My parents came out in '51 as teenagers, without barely a word of English between them. And when I joined the army, it wasn't unusual to have people from very different backgrounds. In fact, I remember a story that 3 SAS squadrons tour of Vietnam was called the Spot the Aussie Squadron. That's what SAS stood for. And we didn't have Italo soldiers and Greco soldiers. We just soldiers, Australian soldiers. Yeah. And the moment you start to divide and say we have LGBTI soldiers, you're dividing. And once again, a defence force requires unity of purpose, otherwise it fails. And our allies and our adversaries are laughing.
Well, this is sort of my question, is what does the chief of the Admiral, presumably, who runs the Australian Navy, who's got time to order his sailors to paint their nails. That's his top priority, his most important task, his means of instilling discipline and combat readiness in his troops.
It breaks trust. There's only one question to ask, because like any complex organisation, Defence has 1,000 choices a minute to make.
Well, one of them, Riccardo, I'll tell you, according to Miranda's article here and according to the guide, misgendering can have a significant effect on transgender individuals, as it is often an expression of a lack of understanding of acceptance of that person's identity. So in the middle of the battlefield, are you sitting there thinking, hang on, that person over there, I'm worried whether I'm misrepresenting their gender? Is that top of mind? Should it be?
You've got to be an imbecile. Because what they don't teach these people, and I can't believe they don't understand this, that life is hard and tough and unfair, and sometimes you just got to hack it. You can do everything right and you don't get what you deserve. You do everything wrong and you get a medal. Soldiers need to understand and live through that. And in a perverse kind of way, the brutality of military training prepares them for just that. Can you hack it? There's nothing to do but hunker down, take the artillery barrage, metaphorical or literal makes no difference. Be there when it's over and then step up and fight. I remember in 78 when I first joined the Army, Royal Military College, Duntrine. Bunch of kids on a bus, not even 18 years of age yet. Sergeant T.J. Slaney and my colleagues will be shivering their boots now, the most fearsome drill sergeant you can imagine. He got on the bus and in a low menacing voice told us to get off, and we were terrified. And that was the beginning of this process of just being able to handle that which most people can't handle. And think about it, if an individual is going to be upset because they were called the wrong name, something tells me they're not psychologically robust enough to handle warfighting.
Well, look, I just
Did
I hear a rumour that
we have some great news?
Might have been selected to play, you know, a greater role, a new mission has been given to you, whether or not you succeed. What is your new mission?
I've been selected to run as a Senate candidate at the next federal election for the Australian Conservatives for New South Wales.
Well done, Corey Bernardi. Corey knows how to pick them. Well done, Riccardo. Congratulations. That's fantastic news.
Thank you.
And we want to see you there in the Senate so that you can tell Marise Payne to her face what you think about the pinkies and the transgender pronouns.
And so thanks for coming on. We just want to say to the Australian Chief of the Navy, we are expecting next for you to give us the sort of the palette of different colours of nails. We've had pink. We're wondering, what is the next? You know, should we have mauve? Should we have nude? Should we have red, perhaps, to the Chief of the Navy? I'm sure you're looking at L'Oreal. You're probably looking at the other makers available. Perhaps the Australian Defence Force could brand their own nail polish that could be distributed to troops on arrival on the ship.
Sounds a good idea. Thanks again, Riccardo, and we look forward to seeing you again on Outsiders. Thanks so much.